Millionaire saw his baby talking to a poor nurse. He froze when she said, "I used to be your wife's nurse." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. As the cold winter air swirled through the towering city buildings, a young nurse named Sarah made her way through the brightly lit hospital corridors. She had been working long hours, her exhaustion hidden behind a professional smile. As she passed the neon signs flickering above the hospital's main entrance, her mind briefly wandered to the life she left behind. Her struggling single mother, her own dream of opening a small art gallery, and the pressures that weighed on her shoulders. She had long ago sacrificed her dreams for the stability of taking care of others, but on the inside, she couldn't help but feel empty. Sarah stepped into the maternity ward, where she was assigned to care for the newborns. Her shift had just begun, and she was assigned to one of the most delicate babies in the ward, little Mia. Mia's parents were high-profile and often too busy to visit, leaving the young nurse to handle the emotional and physical care of the infant on her own. She had spent hours making sure Mia was well-fed and comfortable, but tonight, as she adjusted the baby's blanket, something caught her eye. A man, well-dressed and clearly wealthy, stood at the door, watching his daughter with an intense gaze. Sarah didn't immediately recognize him, but something about his posture, his look of concern, made her pause. It wasn't unusual for high-net-worth individuals to visit, but this man had an air of sadness, as if he were wrestling with a deeper emotion. He took a few steps forward, his eyes still on the baby. "Is she okay?" he asked softly, his voice almost a whisper. Sarah, startled by his sudden presence, smiled warmly. "Yes, she's fine. Just a little restless, but it's normal for babies her age." The man nodded but didn't leave her side. He leaned against the doorframe, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. "I haven't been able to spend much time with her," he admitted, looking down. His voice trembled slightly. Sarah had seen this many times. Wealthy parents overwhelmed by their busy lives, trying to keep up with their careers and responsibilities while neglecting the very relationships they held dear. "She's lucky to have you here now," Sarah said gently, trying to offer him comfort. The man smiled faintly. "I hope I can make up for it. I haven't been a good father." Sarah didn't say anything for a moment, sensing that he needed to hear the words, but wasn't quite ready to hear them. She continued her work, gently shifting Mia's tiny body to a more comfortable position in the incubator. Just then, Mia's small hand reached out, seemingly grabbing hold of Sarah's finger. It was a moment of pure innocence, and Sarah felt a tug at her heart. As she looked up, the man stood frozen, his gaze locked on her hand, and then his face shifted, as if realizing something. For a second, Sarah felt an uncomfortable chill sweep over her. The moment was interrupted when Mia cooed, breaking the tension. Sarah smiled at the baby and looked back at the man, still wondering what had just occurred. "What's your name?" the man asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. Sarah looked at him, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Sarah," she replied. He nodded, as though hearing her name for the first time. "You look familiar," he murmured, though he didn't elaborate. As she turned to check on Mia again, she felt the weight of his gaze on her. Was it possible that he recognized her from somewhere? But before she could answer, the man cleared his throat and straightened up. "I'll be back later. Thank you for taking care of my daughter." Sarah nodded as he left the room, a lingering sense of unease hanging in the air. She tried to brush it off, focusing on her duties, but a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. As the door clicked shut, she glanced at Mia, who was now peacefully sleeping, unaware of the whirlwind of thoughts that were stirring in her father's mind. What could possibly connect this man, this wealthy father, with her? Sarah had no idea yet, but soon, the answers would reveal themselves in the most unexpected way. As Sarah continued her shift, the events from the previous encounter lingered in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something about that man, his sadness, and his connection with Mia was somehow familiar. She moved through the next few hours mechanically, attending to the other infants, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the man who had stood in the doorway. Who was he really? And why did he look at her the way he did? Was it just a coincidence? Or was there something more to the story? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts aside as she checked on Mia again, who was now peacefully sleeping. Her shift finally ended, and Sarah stepped out of the hospital, the cold night air greeting her like a slap in the face. The bustling streets of the city felt strangely distant, like she was living in two worlds. She was just about to hop into a cab when her phone buzzed. It was a message from her best friend, Emily, who had been encouraging her to take time for herself. "You're always working. You need a break, girl." Sarah smiled weakly, replying that she was fine. She didn't want to admit that, deep down, she was exhausted. The cab ride home was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the engine as she stared out the window, lost in thought. When she arrived at her small apartment, she was greeted by the sight of her little dog, Milo, waiting by the door. The sight of him always brought a sense of comfort. Sarah kicked off her shoes and sank into the couch, pulling out her phone once more. She had hoped that by now, she would have heard something from her family. But as usual, there was nothing. Her mother was always too busy, and her younger brother was often wrapped up in his own life. She sighed, feeling the weight of isolation pressing in on her. But just as she was about to put her phone down, a message came through from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Sarah. This is David Carter. I was at the hospital today and wanted to speak with you. Can we meet tomorrow?" She blinked in confusion, her heart suddenly racing. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. She tapped on the message, staring at the screen as her mind raced. Could it be him? The man from earlier? Her thoughts were interrupted by another buzz, this time from Emily. "What's going on with you? You look a little off today. Want to talk about it?" Sarah rubbed her temples, trying to collect her thoughts. She wasn't sure what to make of David's message. She had a bad habit of overthinking, and this time was no exception. What did he want from her? Why had he reached out? She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind that there was something more to this story. After a long pause, she finally replied to the message, agreeing to meet him the following afternoon. The next day, Sarah arrived at the address David had sent her. It was a high-end cafe in the heart of the city, the kind of place she had only ever passed by on her way to work. She walked inside, trying not to feel out of place in her simple coat and scarf. The warmth of the cafe hit her immediately, and she glanced around. There he was, sitting at a corner table, looking much more approachable than he had the day before. David stood as she approached, giving her a soft smile. "Thank you for meeting with me," he said as they shook hands. Sarah couldn't help but notice how different he looked without the tense air of a hospital waiting room hanging over him. He looked more like a man who had lived 1,000 lives, his calm demeanor masking a deeper turmoil. They sat down, and Sarah waited for him to speak. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out to you," he started, his voice steady. "I've been thinking about our conversation, and there's something I need to say. When I saw you with Mia, it brought back a lot of memories." Sarah raised an eyebrow, still unsure where this conversation was heading. "What kind of memories?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "My wife," David said softly, looking down at the table for a moment. "She was in that same position many years ago. Before Mia was born, she was in the same hospital you work at. You took care of her. I know this might sound strange, but I believe you're the same nurse who helped her." Sarah froze, her mind spinning. She remembered the woman he spoke of now, the wife who had been in and out of the hospital, struggling with illness. But she had never expected to be sitting across from her husband, the father of the child she now cared for. "I remember you," Sarah said softly, a wave of recognition flooding her. "But I never thought." She stopped herself, trying to find the words. David nodded, his expression still calm, but filled with a depth of emotion she hadn't expected. "I never had the chance to thank you for everything you did for her. For us. I never had the chance to say goodbye properly." Sarah felt the weight of his words, the air thick with unspoken grief. She wasn't sure how to respond. The world she had known in the hospital, her quiet, unassuming life, was suddenly intertwined with the life of this wealthy man, the father of the child she was now caring for. She was no longer sure where her place was in all of this. As Sarah listened to David's words, the weight of the past few days pressed down on her. She had always known that working in the hospital, especially with high-profile patients, would mean dealing with emotions that ran deeper than the treatments she provided. But this was different. David, Mia's father, wasn't just another wealthy client. He was connected to her in a way she hadn't anticipated. She wasn't sure how to respond to him. I never had the chance to thank you for everything you did for her. For us, David repeated softly, his voice full of sorrow. Sarah glanced at him, his calm exterior hiding the storm she could sense beneath the surface. It wasn't anything, she replied, her words hesitant. I was just doing my job. Your wife? She was a beautiful woman, and I did what I could. David's eyes softened, but there was a sadness in them that made Sarah's heart ache. She told me about you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. How kind you were to her. How you helped her when she couldn't help herself. I never realized how much she needed someone like you. Sarah swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure. She had always kept her emotions in check when it came to her patients. But this situation was different. She had been there for David's wife during her most vulnerable moments, and now here she was, face to face with him, the man she had never expected to meet. The silence between them stretched, each of them processing the gravity of the moment. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice steady but soft. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, David replied, his tone gentle. I just needed you to know, and I wanted to ask you something more personal. Sarah raised an eyebrow, curious but cautious. What is it? She asked. David hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. I've been thinking a lot about what you said yesterday. About Mia. About the kind of father I've been, he began. I don't want to make the same mistakes. I want to be there for her, truly be there for her. But I can't do it alone. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She knew what he was asking, and yet, she wasn't sure if she was ready to make that kind of commitment. I'm not sure what you mean, she said carefully. David's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her stomach twist. I'm asking if you would consider being a part of Mia's life, he said. Not just as her nurse, but as someone who could help me raise her. I don't want to rely on nannies or hired help anymore. I want someone who truly cares. Sarah froze. She wasn't sure if she had heard him right. This wasn't just about a job or a favor. He was offering her something much bigger, an opportunity to become part of Mia's life, to become part of his life. The thought both terrified and intrigued her. She had always kept her personal and professional lives separate, but this was different. There was something about David's sincerity that made her believe he wasn't asking her out of desperation, but out of a real need for connection. I don't know, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is a lot to consider. David nodded, as if he understood the weight of what he was asking. I don't expect you to decide right now, he said, but I want you to think about it. Mia needs stability, and so do I. Sarah's mind raced as she processed his words. The idea of becoming more involved in Mia's life, of becoming a constant in her world, was both a dream and a nightmare. She had always wanted to make a difference, to help someone in need, but she hadn't expected it to come in the form of a wealthy man asking for her to become a part of his family. As Sarah left the cafe, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The proposal was unexpected, and yet, in a way, it made sense. She had been helping people for so long, but she had never been asked to truly become part of their lives like this. She glanced at her phone as a message from Emily popped up. You okay? You've been quiet. Sarah hesitated before replying, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I'm fine. Just trying to figure some things out. The message felt distant, almost too personal to share. She wasn't sure if she was ready to talk about it yet. As she walked home, the city lights flickered around her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't control. David had given her an opportunity, a chance to make a real difference in a child's life. But at what cost? She wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of commitment, especially when her own heart still felt empty from everything she had left behind. The decision weighed heavily on her as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty for Sarah. She spent her time in the hospital, caring for her patients, but her mind kept drifting back to David's offer. The words he had spoken echoed in her thoughts, and she couldn't help but wonder what it would mean to become a part of Mia's life. The idea of being involved in the life of a child, especially a child who had already experienced so much, was both a dream and a daunting responsibility. Could she really take that step? Could she become part of a family that seemed so out of reach, so different from the life she had known? Sarah had always been the type to keep things professional, to distance herself from emotional attachments. But David's request wasn't just about professional boundaries. It was personal, and it stirred something deep within her that she hadn't felt in a long time. As the weekend approached, she found herself standing at the edge of a decision, unsure of which direction to take. Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a message from David. "I know this is a big decision. I understand if you need more time, but I would love to meet you again, maybe discuss things further. I'm here whenever you're ready." Sarah stared at the message for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. David was giving her space, but the pull of his offer was undeniable. That evening, she sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand, as she reflected on her life. She had always wanted to make a difference. She had always cared for others, but she had never been asked to be part of something so meaningful, something that went beyond just doing her job. The idea of helping Mia grow up, of being a guiding figure in her life, was tempting, but she wasn't sure she was ready for the emotional weight it carried. She had her own dreams, her own struggles, and the thought of becoming too involved with David's family, with Mia, felt like it might complicate everything. Yet, there was something in David's eyes that made her think twice. He wasn't asking for a quick fix or a temporary solution. He was asking for a real connection, for someone who could help raise his daughter. It was a responsibility, yes, but it was also an opportunity. Sarah couldn't deny that. The next day, she arrived at the cafe where she had agreed to meet David. This time, she felt more confident, though the butterflies in her stomach still fluttered. As she entered the cafe, she saw him sitting at the same corner table, waiting for her. He stood when he saw her, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Sarah, thank you for coming," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I know you've been thinking about everything, and I appreciate you giving me this time." Sarah nodded, taking a seat across from him. "I've been thinking a lot," she admitted. "I just don't know if I'm the right person for this. I've never been a mother, and I don't want to overstep my boundaries." David leaned in, his gaze soft yet firm. "You don't need to be a mother, Sarah. You just need to care. That's what Mia needs. Someone who genuinely cares. She's had a difficult start in life, and I don't want her to feel abandoned. But I also know I can't do it alone." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected him to say it so plainly, so honestly. It was clear he wasn't just looking for help. He was looking for someone who could be there for Mia in a way he couldn't be, not because he didn't want to, but because he was still healing from the loss of his wife. "I don't know," Sarah said softly, her hands wrapped around her mug. "I'm not sure I can give her what she needs." David smiled gently. "You already have. Just by being here, just by listening. That's the first step." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe filling the space between them. Sarah took a deep breath, realizing that, maybe, just maybe, she was ready for this. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, she felt like she could be part of something bigger than herself. "I'll give it a try," she said, her voice steady now. "For Mia, and for you." David's smile widened, and Sarah could see the relief in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. "You won't regret this. I promise." As they talked more about the practicalities of their arrangement, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was a big step, but it was a step towards something meaningful. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change for Sarah. The decision to become involved in Mia's life was still settling in, but each day brought new experiences. David's house, once a grand mansion she had only seen from a distance, had become her second home. Sarah had been welcomed into their world, though she still felt like a stranger in a place so different from her own. Mia, however, seemed to have taken to her immediately, always looking for Sarah's attention, pulling at her hands for playtime and hugs. At first, Sarah struggled with the weight of the new role she had taken on. She wasn't just Mia's nurse anymore. She was becoming a part of the child's life, a constant figure. It was an adjustment, and the doubts still lingered in her mind. Could she really do this? Could she be the person that Mia needed in her life? But as days turned into weeks, those doubts started to fade. Sarah found herself enjoying the time she spent with Mia, the little girl's infectious laughter filling the rooms of the house, making it feel like a real home for the first time in a long while. She also saw a softer side of David, one that he kept hidden from the outside world. He wasn't the cold, distant millionaire she had initially thought. He was a father who had lost his wife, struggling to raise his daughter while holding onto the memory of his late spouse. As much as he tried to remain composed, Sarah could see the pain behind his eyes, the weight of his responsibilities. One evening, after Mia had gone to bed, David invited Sarah to dinner in the formal dining room. The atmosphere was different, more intimate than the usual family meals they shared. As they sat across from each other, Sarah could sense that David had something on his mind. "Sarah," he began, his voice low, "I want to thank you for everything you've done for Mia and for me." Sarah paused, surprised by his sincerity. "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "I'm just doing what I can." David shook his head. "No, you don't understand. You've become a part of her life in a way I could never have imagined. You're the stability she needs right now." Sarah looked down at her plate, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to hearing praise, especially not for something so personal. She had always kept her emotions guarded, and the idea of becoming so close to someone, let alone a family, was a challenge she hadn't fully prepared for. "It's just that I'm not sure I'm ready for this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. David leaned forward, his expression softening. "I understand. It's a lot to take in, but I want you to know that Mia and I are here. We appreciate everything you've done, and we want you to feel like you're a part of this." The sincerity in his words made Sarah's heart ache. She had never imagined that she would find herself in a position like this, that she would become so intertwined in someone else's life, especially a life so different from her own. But as she looked at David, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take that leap. The next few weeks were filled with small victories, shared moments with Mia, quiet talks with David, and the growing sense that Sarah was becoming more than just a caregiver. She was becoming part of their family. David, for his part, was doing everything he could to make her feel welcomed and valued. He wasn't just the businessman she had first thought him to be. He was a man who had lost everything and was now trying to rebuild, not just his life, but his family. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, David turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he said. "I want you to be more than just Mia's caregiver. I want you to be part of her future and ours." Sarah met his gaze, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I'm asking you to stay with us, permanently," David said, his voice steady. "You've already become a part of our lives, and I want to make that official. I need you, Sarah. Mia needs you." The words hit Sarah like a wave, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. She had come so far, but now the decision seemed even bigger than before. It wasn't just about caring for Mia. It was about becoming a permanent part of their family. And as she looked at David, she knew that this was a decision that would change everything. After a long silence, Sarah finally spoke. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. David smiled softly, his eyes filled with hope. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just know that the offer is there." Sarah's heart raced as she processed his words. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The moment where she had to decide whether or not she was ready to truly belong to someone else's life, to truly build a family with them. She wasn't sure yet, but for the first time, she felt like she had a place where she mattered. The days that followed were filled with a quiet intensity as Sarah grappled with the decision that had been placed before her. She spent her time with Mia, helping the little girl with her daily routines, but her mind often wandered back to the conversation with David. His offer, his genuine request for her to stay, to be more than just Mia's caregiver, hung over her like a cloud, one she wasn't sure she was ready to let go of. She wasn't sure how to navigate this new chapter. Could she really stay with them permanently? Was she ready to take on the responsibility of becoming a part of their family, of being someone they could depend on for the long haul? As the weekend came and went, Sarah found herself walking through the house more thoughtfully than usual. Every corner seemed to hold a memory now, of laughter with Mia, of quiet moments with David as they sat together in the evening, of shared silences that somehow spoke volumes. She had never expected this life, this connection to form so quickly, but now it was a part of her. And though part of her feared getting too close, another part felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. That evening, David invited her to join him and Mia for dinner in the garden. It was a simple affair, but there was something about the quiet warmth of the space, the soft glow of the lights above, that made it feel different from the usual meal. As they sat down to eat, Mia giggled as she tried to feed the dog under the table, and Sarah couldn't help but smile. The little moments were beginning to feel like everything. "Sarah," David said, his voice calm but steady. I know this is all happening so fast, and I don't want to pressure you into anything. But I want you to know that we're here, and we want you to be here with us. I need you to be part of this, if you're ready. Sarah looked at him, her heart racing. This was the moment she had been avoiding. She had felt the weight of his words before, but now, sitting here, with Mia's laughter filling the air and David's gaze steady and kind, it felt different. It felt right. She could see how much he wanted this, how much Mia needed it. And deep down, she knew that, despite her reservations, she wanted it too. David, she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I'm not sure I've ever been ready for something like this. But I do know that I care about you and Mia. And I want to try. I want to be part of this family, even if it's scary. David smiled, the relief on his face clear. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just being here, just showing up every day, is enough. Sarah nodded, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lifting from her shoulders. She had made the decision, and it felt right. As they finished dinner, Sarah watched Mia play with her toys, and for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was starting to belong somewhere. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Sarah found herself becoming more integrated into their lives, her presence slowly blending into the fabric of their routine. She helped Mia with school projects, accompanied David to meetings, and spent quiet evenings with the two of them, learning more about their world. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when Sarah questioned whether she was truly capable of stepping into the role that David had offered. But each time she doubted herself, Mia's smile or a kind word from David reminded her why she had chosen this. She was making a difference, and it felt like the most important thing she had ever done. As the weeks passed, Sarah and David's relationship also began to change. They had moments of quiet understanding, moments when their conversations moved beyond the surface and into something deeper. David shared more about his wife, his loss, and how much he struggled to move forward after her death. Sarah, in turn, opened up about her own past, her struggles, and the dreams she had once set aside. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. One night, as they sat in the living room, sipping wine after Mia had gone to bed, David turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. You've changed my life, Sarah, he said quietly. You've given me hope again. I didn't think I could ever find peace after losing her, but you've made that possible. Sarah met his gaze, her heart swelling with emotion. I never thought I'd be the one to change anything for you, she replied softly. But I'm glad I'm here. They sat in silence, the weight of their words hanging in the air. It wasn't a grand gesture or a declaration, but it was enough. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she was part of something meaningful, something that mattered. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a mother figure, a partner, and, most importantly, she was home. The days following their conversation felt like a turning point for Sarah. As she settled more into her role with David and Mia, the unease that had once accompanied her every step began to fade. The walls she had carefully built around herself over the years were slowly coming down, piece by piece, as she allowed herself to fully embrace her new life. She spent her days caring for Mia, supporting David in his work, and becoming an active presence in their household. It was a life that felt full in ways she hadn't anticipated. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, a shadow of doubt crept into Sarah's mind. One evening, after a long day of helping Mia with her schoolwork and attending to David's business calls, she sat alone in the living room. The soft glow of the evening light illuminated the room, but she felt a coldness in the air. She was beginning to see how much she had truly changed, not just in terms of her role in the family, but in her own heart. She was falling in love with the life they had built, with David and with Mia. But just as quickly as she felt these emotions, another wave of fear washed over her. What if she wasn't enough for them? What if her past, her struggles, held her back from truly being a part of their future? The thought was unsettling, and she couldn't shake it. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, she heard a soft knock on the door. David stepped in, his face etched with concern. Sarah, are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle. Sarah smiled, but the strain in her eyes was obvious. Yeah, I'm fine, she replied, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. David sat beside her, his presence grounding. You don't have to pretend, Sarah. I can tell something's on your mind. She paused, not sure how to put her feelings into words. She had never been good at opening up, at sharing her doubts. But something about David's patience, his willingness to listen, made her feel safe. "I'm just scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never had a life like this. I don't know if I'm enough for you and Mia. I don't know if I can be what you need." David's expression softened, and he reached out, taking her hand in his. "Sarah, you've already proven more than enough. You've given us both something we never thought we could have: love, stability, and a sense of home." His words, simple but sincere, eased the weight on her chest. She had always questioned her worth, always wondered if she was good enough. But hearing David speak from the heart, knowing that he saw her for who she truly was, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly what they needed. "I don't know if I can ever truly repay you for what you've done for us," David continued. "But I want you to know that you're not alone. Mia and I, we're in this together. You've given us something we never thought we could have." Sarah felt her heart swell at his words, the overwhelming sense of relief and love washing over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, she realized that it didn't matter. They had created something real, something lasting. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she truly belonged. "Thank you, David," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." David smiled, his eyes warm. "You don't have to thank me, Sarah. This is what family does. We take care of each other." Over the next few days, Sarah felt a shift within herself. She was no longer consumed by the fear of not being enough. Instead, she embraced the love and support that surrounded her. She and David had become a team, and together, they were raising Mia with all the love and care she needed. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a knock on the door interrupted their peace. A visitor had arrived, someone from David's past, someone who would bring with them a storm that would shake their new life to its core. The doorbell rang late one evening, cutting through the quiet calm of their home. Sarah had just finished putting Mia to bed and was cleaning up the kitchen when she heard the sound. Her mind immediately raced. It was past the usual visiting hours for David's colleagues or clients. Who could it be? David, who had been reading in the living room, looked up at the sound. He gave her a quick glance before heading toward the door. Sarah's heart began to beat faster, unsure of what to expect. As David opened the door, a man stepped into the entryway. His face was familiar, though Sarah couldn't place him right away. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features that looked stern, almost cold. His suit was impeccably tailored, and he carried an air of authority that filled the space. David's expression tightened when he saw the man. "What are you doing here?" David asked, his voice steady but with a hint of irritation. The man didn't immediately answer. Instead, he stepped inside, brushing past David. "I think you know why I'm here," the man replied. Sarah watched from the kitchen, her curiosity piqued. The tension between the two men was palpable, and she could feel the shift in the air as the stranger's presence filled the room. David closed the door behind him, his jaw clenched. "You shouldn't have come here," David said, his voice low and controlled. "You have no business in my home." The man turned to face him, his eyes piercing. "You can't keep running from this, David. It's time to face the truth." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at his words. She slowly approached the living room, trying to make sense of the situation. The man didn't seem like just a business associate. There was something personal about his presence, something that hinted at a deeper history between him and David. "Who is he?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David didn't immediately answer, his eyes never leaving the man. The stranger turned his gaze towards Sarah, his eyes assessing her, as if deciding whether to speak or not. Finally, David spoke. "This is Nathan," he said, his voice tight. "He's my half-brother." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. She had never heard David mention a brother. "What's going on, David?" she asked, the confusion clear in her voice. Nathan let out a low chuckle, his eyes glinting with something sharp. "Oh, I think David's just tired of running from the truth. The truth is, everything he's built is mine, by right." David's expression darkened. "You're still trying to take what's mine, Nathan?" Nathan's smile faded, replaced by something darker. "It's not just about money, David. You know that. It's about what you've done, what you've hidden from everyone. And now, I'm here to expose it." Sarah felt a sense of unease crawl up her spine. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was something far more serious. "Expose what?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Nathan turned his gaze back to her, his smile returning. Oh, don't worry, Sarah. You'll find out soon enough. David stepped forward, blocking Sarah's view of Nathan. You have no right to be here, David said firmly. Whatever this is, you need to leave. Nathan's eyes narrowed. I'm not leaving until we've sorted this out, David. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. The tension in the room was suffocating. Sarah could feel the weight of the words hanging between them. What was David hiding? Why had Nathan come here? And what did he want from David now? She looked at David, her heart heavy with uncertainty. He had never mentioned anything about a brother before. Was this the man who had caused all the trouble in David's life, the one who had been the source of his pain? Nathan stood still for a moment, watching David carefully, then turned to Sarah with a cold, calculating smile. Don't worry, Sarah. This won't take long. I'll make sure you know the truth soon enough. With that, Nathan turned and walked toward the door, his presence lingering like a storm cloud. David stood frozen for a moment, watching him leave. The moment the door closed behind Nathan, Sarah turned to David, her mind racing. What just happened? She asked, her voice soft, yet filled with concern. David ran a hand through his hair, clearly shaken. You don't need to worry about Nathan, he said, though his words didn't sound as convincing as they should have. This is just something from my past. I'll handle it. Sarah wasn't sure she believed him. She could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear she had seen in him when he had first spoken of his wife. Something was about to unravel, and she didn't know if they were ready for it. The next few days were tense, filled with unease and unanswered questions. Nathan's unexpected visit left an unsettling mark on Sarah, and though David insisted that everything would be handled, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deep and painful was being hidden from her. As the week passed, Sarah found herself growing more and more distant from David. He became withdrawn, his usual warmth replaced by a quiet, almost suffocating silence. She could tell he was struggling with something, and though he tried to hide it, the weight of whatever Nathan had uncovered was taking its toll on him. It wasn't until one evening, as they sat together in the living room, that David finally broke his silence. I need to tell you the truth, Sarah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. About Nathan and everything that's happened. Sarah's heart raced as she turned to face him. What's going on, David? She asked, her voice filled with concern. David took a deep breath, as if gathering the strength to speak. Nathan, he's my half-brother. But we weren't close growing up. My father was a powerful man, but he was also corrupt. He used people, and Nathan and I were both caught in that world. When my mother died, my father turned all his attention to business, and Nathan and I became pawns in his games. It's why I left. I wanted to escape all of that. Sarah's eyes widened as she listened to him, piecing together the fragments of his past. But Nathan, he's always been obsessed with power. He wants to take control of everything, and that includes the legacy our father left behind. He's been trying to destroy everything I've built, my company, my family, just to get back at me for leaving. Sarah reached out and gently placed her hand on his. David, I had no idea. I didn't know you went through all of that. David nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and anger. I've been running from my past for so long. But Nathan is right. I can't keep hiding from it. I need to face it head on, for Mia's sake, for yours, for everything we've built. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what was to come. Sarah knew that David's past had shaped him in ways she couldn't fully understand, but now, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, she felt a deeper connection to him than ever before. She had come into his life to help, to care for Mia, but now, she realized that she was a part of his story too. I'm with you, David, Sarah said, her voice steady. Whatever happens next, I'm not going anywhere. David looked at her, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. You don't know what you're saying, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. This isn't just about me. This is about my family, my company. It's going to get messy. Sarah squeezed his hand. I don't care about any of that. I care about you, about Mia. And I'll be here, no matter what. We'll face it together. David nodded slowly, as if absorbing her words for the first time. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and legal battles as David began to confront Nathan and the damage he had caused. But through it all, Sarah remained by his side, offering her support and strength. She was no longer just the caretaker. She was his partner in every sense of the word. As the dust began to settle, and Nathan's plans slowly unraveled, David turned to Sarah with a look of gratitude. I couldn't have done this without you, he said, his voice full of sincerity. You've given me the strength to face everything I've been running from. Sarah smiled softly, her heart swelling with love for the man who had become so much more than just Mia's father. I'm not going anywhere, David, she said, her voice unwavering. We're in this together, all the way. And with that, the last remnants of the past were finally laid to rest, and David, Sarah, and Mia began their new life. One built on love, trust, and the strength of their bond. They had faced the storm together, and now, as they looked toward the future, they knew they were ready to build something even more beautiful, a family, united and stronger than ever.